All right, today we're putting on our detective hats. We're diving into a case that's all about uncovering the secret clues our own bodies leave behind, long before we might ever feel sick. We're basically on the hunt for biological smoke detectors. So let's get this investigation started.
I mean, just think about it for a second. What if a simple test could spot the very first whispers of cancer, or Alzheimer's, or heart disease, giving us a massive head start to actually fight back? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Well, it's a future that's getting closer and faster than you might think. And the key to unlocking that future? It all comes down to one word: biomarkers. These are the absolute heroes of our story today. They're the molecular breadcrumbs that can lead us straight to a diagnosis, and, even better, to a treatment plan that's made just for you. So what exactly are these biomarkers? Well, to really get it, let's use a simple analogy that just nails it. Think of them as a smoke detector, but for your body.
Okay, so technically, a biomarker is any measurable sign in our body, could be a gene, a protein, you name it, that points to a specific biological state. So just like your smoke detector starts screaming about a fire you can't see or smell yet, a biomarker can warn us about a disease that hasn't caused a single symptom. And what's really amazing is that a lot of these clues are just floating around in our blood, which means we can find them with pretty simple tests.
And they have three really crucial jobs in medicine. A diagnostic biomarker is the one that says, yep, this disease is definitely here. A prognostic one is more like a weather forecast, predicting how the disease is likely to play out. And then there's the predictive biomarker, which is the ultimate tool for personalized medicine. It tells doctors which specific treatment is going to work best for you. So you see, they're not just warning bells. They're an actual roadmap for doctors, guiding them straight to the best course of action.
Okay, so now that we know what biomarkers are, let's get into the really cool part: how scientists actually find them. It's a process that honestly feels a lot like a detective story. And this investigation, well, it starts with the most fundamental piece of evidence there is: our genes. So the primary crime scene is our DNA, and it is an enormous blueprint, just packed with billions of letters of code. And hidden somewhere inside all of that data are the clues we're looking for. These tiny variations that might make us susceptible to a disease or actually drive its growth. Our detectives are basically pursuing two main lines of inquiry. First, they're on the lookout for inherited clues. These are the genetic variants you're born with, the ones passed down through your family tree. You can think of them as clues left at the scene from generations ago. And then they hunt for acquired clues. These are mutations that just sort of pop up during your lifetime. They're like random typos in your DNA code. And they're often the main culprit behind things like cancer. Now, finding a single inherited clue, that's like finding a needle in a haystack the size of a galaxy. The process, as you can see here, is super systematic. The detectives sequence the DNA from family members, some with the disease, some without. That gives them thousands of genetic variants to look at. Then, the real police work begins. They start filtering, using massive databases to get rid of all the common, harmless variants, narrowing and narrowing the search until they can zero in on the most suspicious genetic culprits. And check this out. This is a real-world case file. In a study looking at one family with high rates of colorectal cancer, scientists started with more than 10,000 potential variants. But by using that exact filtering process, they drilled all the way down to just one, a single mutation in a gene called PTK7. I mean, that's incredible. And a discovery like this doesn't just help one person. It can give answers and a path for early screening to an entire family. Case closed. Okay, so what about those acquired clues, the ones that aren't passed down? For these, the strategy has to change. Instead of looking at just one family, the detectives analyze hundreds, sometimes thousands, of different cases of the same disease. They're looking for a recurring pattern, a clue that shows up again and again and again. And this slide just illustrates that point perfectly. By looking at 185 patients with esophageal cancer, scientists found a smoking gun. A mutation in the TP53 gene showed up in a staggering 84% of them. That's not a coincidence. It's a huge, flashing signal that this one mutation is a major driver of the disease. And finding it, that opens the door to creating drugs that can specifically target that weak spot. But here's the thing. The genetic code, as powerful as it is only one piece of this massive puzzle. To build a truly rock-solid case, our detectives know they need to look at other kinds of evidence to get the whole story.
And that brings us to this absolutely fascinating field called epigenetics. A key player here is something called DNA methylation. Just think of these as tiny biological on-off switches that are attached to your genes. They don't actually change the DNA code, but they control which genes get read and which ones stay quiet. In a lot of diseases, these switches get flipped the wrong way, causing genes that should be off to turn on, or the other way around.
All right, another crucial layer of evidence comes from something called proteogenomics. If our genes are the blueprints for a house, the proteins are the workers who are actually building the house and carrying out all the instructions. So by studying both the genes and the proteins they create, scientists get a much more complete, dynamic picture of what's really going on inside a diseased cell. So when you put all this together, you get what's called a multi-omics strategy. It's a fancy term, I know, but as you can see here, all it really means is that it's like a police investigation that pulls together everywhere: DNA, RNA, proteins, the whole shebang. It's about looking at the case from every single angle. By combining all these layers of data, our detectives can build a totally airtight case and find the most reliable biomarkers. So the clue has been found. The case is built. We're done, right? Not even close. In fact, what comes next might just be the most critical part of the whole journey, taking that discovery from the lab bench to a patient's bedside. Because you see, finding a potential biomarker is one thing, but proving that it's reliable enough and useful enough to actually be used in a clinic, that's a whole different ballgame. Every single potential clue has to go through this incredibly rigorous scientific trial to prove it's the real deal.
And there are major roadblocks on this path. First, scientists have to be absolutely sure they can tell a truly harmful variant apart from a harmless one. That's a huge challenge, because our DNA is full of variations and most are totally fine. Second, the experiments you have to run to prove what a variant actually does can be so slow and so expensive, sometimes taking years. And finally, you have to prove the biomarker actually works in the real world, that it really helps patients. It's a long, tough road, but it's one we have to travel to make sure these new tests are both safe and effective.
But, and this is a big but, despite all of those challenges, the payoff from all this incredible detective work is a future of medicine that is so much more proactive, so much more powerful, and so much more personal. This quote from the source material just captures that vision perfectly. It's a future where we are no longer just waiting around for symptoms to show up. It's a future where a simple blood test is that early warning system, giving us the incredible power of early detection. And that right there is the ultimate goal. All of this painstaking detective work isn't just for a science paper. It is building the foundation for a whole new era of medicine, one that is proactive instead of reactive and is precision-tailored to each and every person's unique biology. And what's going to pour gasoline on this fire of discovery? One simple thing: cost. The price of sequencing an entire human genome is absolutely plummeting. We're on the verge of a $100 genome. This is going to open the floodgates for discovery, letting scientists analyze millions of genomes and uncover countless new clues at a speed we could barely imagine just a few years ago. So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a thought. As this technology gets more powerful and more accessible, you might one day hold your entire genetic blueprint in your hands. So the question is, what's the one thing you would want to ask it? It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it? Thanks for digging into this with me today.